Hello. Hello, everybody. We welcome everybody to this webinar, which is an event organized by the Center for Studies on New Religions, CESNUR, and Human Rights Without Frontiers. It is an event that calls once again the attention on the situation of Taijimen spiritual community in Taiwan from the perspective of media as friends and foes of FoRB and the Taijimen case. My name is Camelia Marin, human rights activist, Deputy Director of Sateria International. I am glad to be here with you today, and I will briefly introduce the subject. We all know and appreciate the mediation and information role of journalists and the mass media. Over time, through the precious information provided in crisis situations, the necessity of the mass media as an element of interconnection and updating has been established. This necessity is recognized in the celebration of the specially designated day, World Press Freedom Day, 3 of May, which is dedicated to the importance of journalism and freedom of expression. Unfortunately, there are some situations when this or misinformation about different issues spread by mass media has consequences upon people's lives, especially when it comes to freedom of belief and the protection of such vulnerable communities as minority religions are. World Press Freedom Day was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in December 1993, following the recommendation of UNESCO's General Conference. After 30 years, the historic connection made between the freedom to seek, impart, and receive information and the public good remains as relevant as it was at the time of its proclamation. This day of observance is also a day of reflection among media professionals about issues of press freedom and professional ethics. We all know that freedom of expression is a fundamental right protected by Article 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights and may be exercised while respecting certain conditions. Freedom of expression is seen as a primary necessity in a democratic society. However, together with the rights come a series of obligations that are interdependent with other values, human rights, and freedoms protected by the same international treaties. Among the obligations related to the right to freedom of expression is the duty to protect human dignity and the respect for the reputation of the rights of others, including the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Where is the limit within which freedom of expression can be manifested without prejudice to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion? Freedom of conscience ensures that all are free to form their own beliefs about the world in which they live and how social life unfolds. The protection of minority opinions is an essential component of pluralism and tolerance in any democratic society. What is too often forgotten is that freedom of expression is not an absolute right, but is regulated by law and should be moderated by responsibility. One may freely express oneself, but in doing so, one should not commit abuses and damage the rights or reputation of others by making false and misleading statements. Unfortunately, this recommendation is largely ignored or not respected across all levels, whether in governmental institutions, mass media, or by individuals. The result is that this perceived total freedom of expression, if it does not include the obligation not to harm the dignity of others, is in the end not a real freedom. In Denmark, the country in which our organization is based, the Fundamental Rights Agency has published a report on discrimination, hatred, or violence against specific groups, as seen in the media and political sphere. Their conclusion was that both the media and political discourse incite to discrimination, hatred, or violence against specific groups. While we celebrate World Press Freedom Day, it is good to be reminded that our own right to express ourselves includes the obligation to manifest informed opinions and the obligation to consider the short or long-term consequences for others when we express misinformation or incomplete truth. To find the right solution for respecting both freedom of expression and other human rights, especially when it comes to mass media, we suggest to them to see the higher perspective and to the society as a whole to facilitate freedom of expression as a way to cultivate our own inner development. We must encourage all levels of society to speak from their hearts and strive towards a more eloquent and mature formulation of questions of conscience, thought, and belief, and how we relate to them. An example of misinterpretation is a situation from Denmark, where one of Soteria International's guests at a conference about freedom of expression, Professor Siri Tellier from the University of Copenhagen, used the case of the documentary film The Mosque Behind the Veil to draw some lessons. Reporting on the film in Danish media had given the impression that an imam was giving a young woman the advice that she should accept that her husband was beating her and not report it to the police, thus going against both Danish values and Danish law. Professor Tellier noted that when the woman finally saw clips from the film, it seemed she had been somewhat misinterpreted. From our research focused on the impact of media and technology on human lives, we can say that words have enormous power and they can do much harm. However, due to the fact that this phenomenon is not well enough known or recognized, we do not treat these cases in such a severe manner as we would if someone would poison our water, even though the effect can be equally devastating. The media's stigmatization of people and practices indeed has consequences and restrict the boundaries of people's experiences, thoughts, and actions. This is a good opportunity to remember the classical golden rule of ethics actually shared by almost all the existing spiritual communities. Treat other people as you wish them to treat you. It is not a limitation of your freedom of speech to behave properly. I mentioned the case in Denmark, and today we will examine another example from Taiwan, where over 400 publications represented in a slanderous way the practices and activities of the Shifu, Grandmaster, and Dizi, disciples of Taiji Man at the beginning of the Taiji Man case. In 1996, the Taiwanese government conducted a political purge targeting religious organizations. A prosecutor named Wu Kuan-yen falsely accused Taiji Man and its Shifu, Dr. Hong Tao-tse, of fraud, tax evasion, and even rising goblins with false witnesses and fabricated evidences, and spread his falsehoods through the media. The Taiji Man case teaches us that prosecutors do not always tell the truth. They can manipulate the media that, in turn, are eager to publish sensational news about minorities they know very little about. It took Taiji Men more than a decade to be found innocent of tax evasion and all other charges by the Criminal Division of the Supreme Court in 2007, which also confirmed that Taiji Men did not owe any tax, although the National Taxation Bureau has continued to harass the movement to this very day. In the meantime, a false and slanderous image of Taiji Men had been created and spread by the media. Media slander, however, can be resisted. Over the past 28 years, under the leadership of Dr. Hong, Taiji Men Dizzy have never given up hope and have always insisted on doing the right thing, seeking for peace, love, and conscience. Before inviting our guests to this webinar to share with us their expertise, we invite you all to watch a video message delivered by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on World Press Freedom Day, 3 of May. Let's watch it now together.
The world is going through an unprecedented environmental emergency which poses an existential threat to these and future generations. People need to know about these, and journalists and media workers have a key role in informing and educating them. Local, national, and global media outlets can highlight stories about the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and environmental injustice. Through their work, people come to understand the plight of our planet and are mobilized and empowered to take action for change. Media workers also document environmental degradation, and they provide evidence of environmental vandalism that helps to hold those responsible to account. It is no surprise that some powerful people, companies, and institutions will stop at nothing to prevent environmental journalists from doing their jobs. Media freedom is under siege, and environmental journalism is an increasingly dangerous profession. Dozens of journalists covering illegal mining, logging, poaching, and other environmental issues have been killed in recent decades. In the vast majority of cases, no one has been held to account. UNESCO reports that in the past 15 years, there have been some 750 attacks on journalists and news outlets reporting on environmental issues, and the frequency of such attacks is rising. Legal processes are also misused to censor, silence, detain, and harass environmental reporters, while a new era of climate disinformation focuses on undermining proven solutions, including renewable energy. But environmental journalists are not the only ones at risk. Around the world, media workers are risking their lives trying to bring us news on everything from war to democracy. I'm shocked and appalled by the high number of journalists killed in Israeli military operations in Gaza. The United Nations recognizes the invaluable work of journalists and media professionals to ensure that the public is informed and engaged. Without facts, we cannot fight mis and disinformation. Without accountability, we will not have strong policies in place. Without press freedom, we won't have any freedom. A free press is not a choice, but a necessity. Our World Press Freedom Day is very important. And so I call on governments, the private sector, and civil society to join us in reaffirming our commitment to safeguarding press freedom and the rights of journalists and media professionals around the world.
Thank you very much for this video. It's a very clear message. And indeed, all of us, we wish the freedom of mass media, the freedom of expression. And I once again encourage also to include the rights and obligations that come with this freedom. And now we will invite our first speaker, Dr. Karolina Maria Kotkowska. She is a researcher in esotericism and new religious movements. She serves as an assistant professor at the Center of the Comparative Studies of Civilizations at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland. Even though I try to pronounce it well, still the name of the university doesn't look so easy to pronounce it. I invite you, Carolina, to share with us your perspective on this special day.
Thank you very much, Camilla. It's Jagiellonian University, and it's all pronounced quite well, especially in the context of Polish names in general. So again, I would like to welcome everyone, and I will start my presentation. And the topic of the relationship between new religious movements and the press, and more broadly the media, is a difficult one. On the one hand, it's obvious to everyone that the media should be free, and this is one of the aspects of the necessary freedom of speech in democratic countries. It's hard to imagine a free and pluralistic society without the possibility of expressing opinions, free circulation of thoughts, and also unrestricted access to reliable information. On the other hand, as researchers of new religious movements, we continually encounter stories where the media have been used to strip vulnerable people of their freedom. Such actions often led to violence, including physical violence, and served as a tool to generate societal phobia towards new religions. The media were employed to construct negative narratives, resulting in police raids, sometimes even involving military personnel or special forces, against individuals without any weapons or criminal background, which were nonetheless presented as appropriate means of dealing with cults. Violation of basic human rights using the media is unfortunately a history we know all too well, not only in the case of individuals and groups, but through entire years of obsession engulfing some countries or regions. And we are not talking about witch hunts, although undoubtedly the mechanism of creating a sense of threat is similar and the comparison is not entirely inadequate. If we delve even deeper into the history of religions, the period of the formulation of monotheisms, the coexistence of numerous competing heterodox groups at various stages of formation, then it will turn out that similar mechanisms were used centuries ago against various religious opponents. Times have changed, social contexts have changed, access to information has changed. One thing has not changed. It is still easy to play on fears. It is one thing to provide accurate information about real threats, and another thing to deliberately arouse and justify fear of threats from an imagined enemy. Of course, one of the fears that is easiest to exploit nowadays is terrorism, which operates in such a way that a small, inconspicuous group of people can cause a great deal of harm to the entire society. It's not difficult to portray a group of individuals as radicals supposedly ready for anything. Stories like this have been happening for years. One can mention, for example, media attacks and tax police intervention against the Damanhur group operating in the Italian Alps, police raids against MISA, the movement for spiritual integration into the absolute established in Romania and operating in various countries, or recently also the attacks on the Argentine-based movement, the Buenos Aires Yoga School. In one of my earlier Tajiman webinars at the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I mentioned how various images of refugees were portrayed in Polish media. On one hand, there was no doubt that immediate assistance should be provided to Ukrainian refugees, of whom about 1 million were eventually accepted, while at the same time, at the forests of the Polish-Belarusian border, victims of the war in Afghanistan, including small children, were dying. These individuals became a part of political game and media frenzy, frightening the public with the threat of Islamic terrorists invading the country. Many documents were created in the wake of those events, as well as the feature film Green Border, directed by Agnieszka Holland. This spring, with a group of researchers of new religiosity, we had an opportunity to visit the headquarters of one of the Islam-based new religious movements advocating for freedom and inclusivity, the Ahmadi Religion of Peace and Light, located in England. The example of experiences within this movement shows how media can play a positive role. During an attempt to legally cross the Turkish-Bulgarian border, the group was attacked for unclear reasons on the Turkish side. It was only thanks to technology enabling satellite data transmission that the documentation of these events and the entire violence during the incident could be recorded and transmitted. Documentation that would otherwise have been stopped or destroyed by authorities committing these acts. Such materials evidencing the violation of human rights of followers managed to reach out media outlets and serve as evidence to initiate legal proceedings to assert their rights and protect members. And today, we will hear the testimonies of the disciples of Taijimen. The oldest of them were there when the Taijimen case started in 1996. They suffered because of politically motivated persecution and the unjust arrest of the leaders, but perhaps they suffered even more because of the media slander. Hundreds of articles depicting Taijimen as cult, defrauding its victims, evading taxes, and even raising goblins were published. All these accusations were eventually declared false by courts of law, but in the meantime, Taijimen Dizi were discriminated in their workplaces, bullied in schools, and even insulted in the streets just for wearing their distinctive uniform. History teaches us that the media can either be allies in the fight for freedom or pose a deadly threat to religious freedom. It all depends on whether they are independent or whether they transmit manipulated data succumbing to political and other pressures. This means, however, that they themselves are not always free. Let's fight for media freedom because only true independence of the media gives hope for communication that builds and strengthens freedom rather than taking it away. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carolina, and it was very well expressed, this lesson that the history is teaching us a lot about how actually the importance of having truth always through the mass media can help, else actually can create bigger problems. And now we'll move to our next speaker, Professor Massimo Introvine. He's an Italian sociologist of religions. He's the founder and managing director of the Centers for Studies on New Religions, CESNUR, an international network of scholars who study new religious movements. Professor Introvine is the author of some 70 books and more than 100 articles in the field of sociology of religion. He has served as the representative on combating racism, xenophobia, and discrimination, with a special focus on discrimination against Christians and members of other religions of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, and also he served as chairperson of the Observatory of Religions Liberty, instituted by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in order to monitor problems of religious liberty on a worldwide scale. And today, Professor Introvine will speak about the anti-religious, anti-cult, and anti-Taijimen bias in the media. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Camelia. One of the most discussed themes by scholars of religion in the 21st century is whether there is an anti-religious bias in the mainline Western media. Although the discussion started much earlier, an important development was the creation in 2013 by the Wolf Institute, an academic institution in Cambridge devoted to the study of the relationship between Muslims, Jews, and Christians, of the Commission on Religion and Belief in British Public Life, which published a report in 2015. While examining other matters as well, the report noted, quote, widespread dissatisfaction with the mainline media's coverage of religion and belief, concern about the portrayal of religion and belief in the media, and a perceived lack of literacy for religion and belief among media professionals. Similar comments were being made in these years by one of the most influential 20th century sociologists of religion in the United States, the late Rodney Stark, a friend from whom I learned much and who was occasionally a co-author of books and articles with me. Building on the previous work of Philip Jenkins, he found in particular an anti-Catholic bias in American media, but noted a negative attitude to all religions. Several scholars asked the question why this was happening. From a position far away from Stark's and quite sympathetic to the media, British sociologist Abby Day offered the explanation that at least in the English-speaking world, journalists in mainline media see themselves as custodians of a shared truth that is secular, liberal, progressive, and passionately committed to causes such as the pro-choice position in the abortion debate and the campaign for same-sex marriage. Religionists, they said, also consider themselves as custodian of a truth that may be very much different. And so the two truth claims unavoidably clash. Back to a totally different perspective, conservative American sociologist George Jency, in his 2015 book, Hostile Environment, focused on American media bias against Christianity and conservative religion in general. He found its roots in the fact that mainline US journalism is a self-perpetuating case. If you are an evangelical Christian, Yancey wrote, or do not agree with the prevailing liberal and secular ideology, particularly on moral matters, you will be thrown out of the first interview when you will try to be hired by one of the mainline media. David Bromley, James T. Richardson, and myself added another nuance. It may be true that most Western large media have bias against religion in general, but this bias is magnified when a religion is stigmatized as a cult. There are two main reasons for this. One is that the media know that lurid tales where religion is mixed with sexual abuse, power, greed, and fraud sell. That a new religion, or even an old religion, is helping its members is not news. But that a religion defrauds and abuses its members is news. The second reason, already evidenced in the British report of 2015 and the discussion that followed, is the serious problem of what experts the media decide to listen to. Since most mainline journalists, as the report said, lack religious literacy in general, being very often non-religious themselves, and know almost nothing about new religious movements, they rely on experts. In the case of cults, since they know that sensationalist tales would sell, they have learned to dismiss the academics who would downplay the sensational elements and look for the anti-cultists. These pseudo-experts will gladly confirm to the media that the new religious movements are bad, dirty, criminal, and deal in things like brainwashing, black magic, or illicit sex, which is exactly the kind of story that would attract readers. The Taiji Man case is a perfect confirmation of this state of affairs. In 1996 and 1997, prosecutor Hu Guanyan, the man largely responsible for creating the Taiji Man case, managed to have 400 or more newspaper articles and over 70 TV reports by 12 different stations repeating its false and slanderous portraits of Taiji men. Some of the stories prosecutor who spread were clearly absurd, yet they were repeated by the media. One was the accusation that Dr. Hong, the Shifu of Taiji men, was raising goblins. Another was the claim that Taiji men had evaded taxes for more than 3 billion of new Taiwan dollars, while the total balance in the relevant accounts was around 600,000 new Taiwan dollars. Between 600,000, which was the total amount of their money, and 3 billion, there is a difference. Why did the media publicize these obvious lies? Because Taiwan is an economically advanced and culturally westernized part of the global West, where media are biased against religion and spirituality, and much more against the groups labeled as frauds or cults. They were ready to believe Prosecutor Ho, whose story was false, but more sensational and newsworthy than the truth. The 2015 British report offered as a solution educating journalists in religious literacy. I believe this is useful, but is not enough. As the Taiji men case demonstrates, there is also an ethical issue for journalists who should consider how much suffering, slandering an innocent spiritual movement will cause. It is, after all, as Taiji men would say, a question of conscience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Massimo, for expressing us all this. And yes, as you pointed out, the Taiji men case is a perfect example of how several media are prejudiced against spiritual movements and how easily believe lies about them. Thank you very much for all this. And now we will invite Willy Fautré, former charge de mission at the cabinet of the Belgian Ministry of Education and at the Belgian Parliament. He's the director of Human Rights Without Frontiers, an NGO based in Brussels that he founded in 1988. His organization defends human rights in general, but also the rights of persons belonging to historical religions, non-traditional and new religious movements. It is apolitical and independent from any religion. He organizes conferences at the European Parliament, including on freedom of religion or belief in China. For years, he has developed religious freedom advocacy in European institutions, at the OSCE and at the United Nations. Willy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Camelia, for this introduction. And we will now start with the second session, mainly devoted to the testimonies of the disciples of Taiji men, who are called Dizzy. But before giving them the floor, first we will have a video for a few minutes.
Japanese media bravely exposes fraud, crack down on corrupt bureaucrats. One day in 2016, a reporter, Long Yi, received a shocking phone call.
The Ministry of Finance sold state-owned land to a selected school. The cost of this, however, was not disclosed. There must be some ruse involved. Moreover, the Prime Minister's wife serves as the school's honorary principal.
When Long Yi heard it, he anticipated it to be a headline. As a result, he started to investigate. First and foremost, he contacted the Ministry of Finance to inquire about the land sale price. He was, however, rejected. The school buyer then bypassed his questions as well. After hitting every wall he could find, he discovered that the price of the land was only 1/10 of the price of the surrounding land. Consequently, Longyi revealed to the world that the Ministry of Finance had sold the land at a low price and colluded with businessmen, sparking widespread debate throughout the country. In response to all those questions, the Prime Minister vehemently denied any involvement in the matter, saying,
"If I or my wife is related to this matter, I will definitely resign as Prime Minister and MP."
More turbulence unexpectedly ensued. Longyi went in search of the land purchase documents at the time under unprecedented duress. It was shockingly found that the Ministry of Finance fiddled with these documents. The names of the Prime Minister's wife and other politicians were removed from the documents, and some people had died as a result. The Ministry of Finance clerk was forced to tamper with fake items, it was discovered. His conscience was deeply condemned by the pressure of obeying his superiors' illegal orders. He chose to commit suicide after being attacked by the public and left a letter of his last words. Following the investigation, the finance minister admitted to tampering with documents. As the public's dissatisfaction grew, the Prime Minister admitted to the people,
"The public's trust in the administrative system has been shaken. Please accept my heartfelt apologies."
Meanwhile, the president of the National Taxation Bureau, who was in charge of land sales at the time, stepped down. So far, the fact that Japanese state-owned land was sold at a low price has been mostly hidden by the massive national black hole. Fortunately, there were still many conscientious media reporters, such as Longyi, who were willing to bear enormous pressure to report the truth, as well as pay attention to politics and express public opinions. As a result, investigation was conducted and officials were forced to admit their mistakes. They can no longer blatantly abuse their power. The Japanese media even made this story into a TV series in order to raise awareness and public interest. Such dramas, which seek personal gain while causing political and judicial injustice, are staged in every country. Only by upholding the principle of justice and being willing to care about and participate in public affairs can people protect human rights and improve the national system.
Well, this was a very interesting video shedding light on the importance of investigation journalism, because more and more we see that newspapers just copy and paste news that were not sufficiently checked or that were really biased in one way or another because of some vested interests, and just copying and pasting and serving that to general public. First of all, before giving the floor to the Dizzy, I would like to share a few thoughts about journalism, ethics, and other issues that are related to this important UN Day devoted to freedom of the media. The well-known human rights NGO Reporters Without Borders has just published its annual report and country ranking, in which it stressed that a growing number of governments or political authorities are not fulfilling their role as guarantors of the best possible environment for journalism and for the public's right to reliable, independent, and diverse news and information. Taiwan, which was ranked in the 35th position last year, jumped this year to the 27th position. Media reporting about religious issues is controversial in many countries, including in democratic countries, despite national ethical guardrails, and international standards. The United Nations, the European Court of Human Rights, the EU Court of Justice, and other international mechanisms use neutral terminologies to name any religious or belief communities in their declarations, reports, and court decisions. Media can be friends when they abide by professional ethical norms, but they can also be enemies when they serve vested interests. The repeated use, without restraint, of derogatory terms with strongly negative connotations is one of the tools privileged by a number of media outlets to name non-mainline religious or belief groups, to qualify their identity, or to misrepresent their beliefs and practices. Those terms are known. Cult, horror cult, destructive cult, guru, mental manipulation, mind control, coercive persuasion, exploitation of devotees, blah, 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 and so on and so on. But behind such unethical practices, we often find disgruntled former members who, out of revenge, want to destroy the image of a movement they may have been members of for many years. They tell stories, true, false, exaggerated, or biased, which can be attractive for the media wanting to increase the readership of their printed or online news and hereby consolidate their financial situation. The consequences of this so-called win-win deal and complicity between these two actors can, however, be dramatic. A few recent examples. The misuse and trivialization of derogatory labels have led to hostility, verbal abuse, physical assaults, as well as vandalism of places of worship. Recently, acts of violence against the community buildings of Jehovah's Witnesses in many countries, including in France. In Germany and India, several Jehovah's Witnesses were even killed in bomb attempts. In Japan, Norway, and other democratic countries, a number of religious minorities are now being deregistered because of all the biased propaganda voiced by the media. In Japan, Jehovah's Witnesses are experiencing an over 600% increase in hate speech and hate crimes compared to the previous 6 years. This spike is a direct consequence of the Japanese government publicly assaulting the character of Jehovah's Witnesses, asserting that parents teaching their religious beliefs to their children is tantamount to child abuse. For years, Taiji men experienced the same problems after the judicial harassment and the media campaign led by prosecutor Hu Kuan-yen against Taiji men when it started in 1996. Under his influence, hundreds of newspapers articles, dozens of TV programs misportrayed Taiji men as a dangerous cult in sensationalist stories, which were very far from the reality, but which would sell. The scholars should further investigate and analyze the media campaign against Taiji men, as Professor Liselott Frisk did with the campaign against the Misa yoga group and their spiritual leader, Gregorian Bivolaru in Finland, in the framework of her paper titled Controversies Around Natha Yoga Center in Helsinki, background, causes, and context. States and societies should always have a look back at the darkest pages of their history. And Taiji men could contribute to that in Taiwan. This would be an appreciated service rendered to the Taiwanese nation, as it would prevent the comeback of dark periods, which were characterized by the media bad habits and practices of privileging the presumption of guilt to the presumption of innocence, as if they were a legitimate court, which they were not. And after this introduction, I would like to give the floor to our first Gizzy, who is Eloy, International Sales Manager. Welcome. Welcome, Eloy.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's my honor to be here. My name is Eloy, and I am the International Sales Representative, also the DG of Taiji Men. It's my honor to participate in the World Press Freedom Day to celebrate our pursuit of the media freedom. However, as we reflect on the current media environment, it is worth reconsidering the surrounding media today. In the past, we always referred to the media as the impartial fourth state, through which the information could be transmitted more justly and openly. However, in today's era of technical advancement, the media can also be influenced. For example, the story proposed by the Spanish philosopher Alfonso López Quintas, whose idea indicated that the linguistic manipulation in the media communication, which corresponds to the phenomena of contemporary media communication, which reflects on the post-truth era. In this age of information explosion, people are now no longer linked to divide into the rational and objective perspectives, but rather rely on their feelings to judge the fact. This creates space for the manipulation in the new media, making it less than entirely impartial. As long as there are those who seek to detect it, it becomes difficult for us to discern the truth. As a DG of Taiji Men, I am deeply affected by the phenomenon. The Shifu and the Dizi of Taiji Men, who were victims of internationally recognized human rights persecution, are the result of this media environment. I started to be Taiji Men Dizi in 2012, when I was struggling with verbal, physical, and psychological bullying during my junior high school period, making it difficult for me to adapt mentally and physically. It was during the time that I encountered Taiji Men by chance. Since becoming a DD, I felt my once fearful heart gradually healed through the guidance of my Shifu. I become braver, learned to balance academic and life, and it was inspired to utilize my linguistic talent, seeking opportunities such as being a scholarship student in Panama and being a volunteer as a tour guide to the Prado Museum of Exhibition in Panama. In addition to enriching my language skill, I gained a valuable life experience. Furthermore, I had the opportunity, along with Dr. Hong, with my Shifu Hong Daozhi, the Zamenren of Taiji Men, in promoting love and peace abroad, embodying of Dr. Hong's spirit of action. If you don't do it, there's no chance. If you do it, there's a chance. However, when I learned about the history of Taiji Men's encounter with state violence in 1996. It was shocked. The prosecutor Ho Kwan-ren and the media reported at the time were completely difficult from what I perceived, saw, and understood. It turns out the story of Alfonso Lopez Guindas had already occurred in Taiwan in 1996. At the very beginning of this case, the prosecutor used the media to transmit the message that violated the principle of confidential investigation, spreading unfounded allegations through the media. By manipulating language, they attempted to make the martial art practice group Katao into compromise. The media environment at the time was no longer balanced, reported seeking the truth, but instead sensationalized, distorted, and exaggerated the situation. Fortunately, justice prevailed. In 2007, the Superior Court ruled in the third trials that Tai Jimen was innocent, not in debate, and didn't violate tax law. And all the innocently detained individuals received compensation from wrongful imprisonment from the state. However, in order to cover up their own illegal actions, those in power repeatedly used the media to obscure the fact. Many uninformed individuals, overwhelmed by the information explosion, didn't take the time to think critically, allowing many to pay little attention and to manipulated by the government, and they didn't take about the importance of this matter. Even for the issues that shake the foundation of the nation, they are still being led by these authorities, creating an illusion that as long as they didn't look up, everything will be fine. We can see that not only the Taijimen human right, the Taijimen people had been persecuted by this violated case, but also various tragedies of humanity in the society had occurred to varying degree due to the abuse of public power and the manipulation of the media right. Therefore, on World Press Freedom Day today, I would like to urge our media friends to fulfill their duties as a journalist with a conscience, reporting information honestly, fairly, and objectively. Let the public receive the current information. As a member of the media, please grant freedom of thought and language autonomy. Transmit truth, force, and justice, and returning everything to the right trace so that all problems can be resolved. I also call our government that Taijimen human rights prosecution case was an absolutely mistake. Don't restrict freedom of the press with invisible hands. Let everything return to the truth. Restore justice to Taijimen, Shifu, and Dizi, and revoke all illegal tax penalty. May all the victims receive sincerely apologies from the government so that the country can become more democratic and open. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Eloy, for addressing the so-called post-truth issue. Until the recent past, the media was considered to be the fourth power in democracy and was held to be reliable, rightly or wrongly, because journalists were thought, maybe naively, by public opinion to abide by the ethical standards of their profession, to be honest and impartial, in a word, to be at the service of the truth and the population. The story of Taiji Man shows that this idyllic picture of the media does not correspond to the reality. Hundreds of articles vilifying Taiji Man were published since 1996, although the accusations were unfounded, as the Supreme Court said 11 years later. The post-truth concept that I will not develop here is just the new mask of non-truth and of lie, showing a nice face of compassion and respect of feelings generated many times by algorithms, troll farms, in order to undermine the real truth. Thank you, Eloy, again, for taking the risk to address this very tricky issue. And now I will give the floor to the second Dizzy, Tong Yu Chen, a retired director of a ceramic factory. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony, and I am very happy to participate in today's forum to commemorate the United Nations World Press Freedom Day. In 1995, I became a Taiji Man Dizzy and gained my health in body, mind as well as soul. Before that, I suffered from nose allergies for more than 10 years. I had experienced a lot of improvement after practicing Taiji Man Qigong for half a year. My vitality has improved, and so did my efficiency. Shifu taught me to learn good things and stop bad habits. I got rid of my bad temper and bad habits. I no longer drink to relieve boredom and live happily every day. When my family witnessed my changes, they all joined, allowing me to retrieve the warmth and happy family. Taiji Man is an ancient Qigong and martial arts Min Pai. Only through ancient rituals can a Shifu-Dizzy relationship be established. Once a Shifu, always a father, and Dizzy is willing to serve. This is a matter of course. I am willing to protect Taiji Man where I call home. On July 31st, 2020, a few days before the Miaoli office of the Administrative Enforcement Agency HSINCHU branch was going to auction the Taiji Man's sacred land, we decided to go to the scene to protest. While applying for the road rights, one of the officers asked in confusion, "How could this happen to you, such a decent organization?" As soon as he stepped in Taiji Man Miaoli branch for understanding our demand, he told us that he watched the live online program Monster Hunting by Brother Long every week, and knew that this has been an unjust case. So he took the initiative to help us get the road rights done. On July 31st, the Administrative Enforcement Agency HSINCHU branch held its first forced auction. Before entering, I saw a notice posted on the iron fence, which stated that only bidding by communication was allowed, whereas on-site bidding was prohibited and invalid. That meant rejecting the rights of people who want to bid on-site. Isn't it breaking the law? Furthermore, the bidding time on the notification was stated at 11 a.m., but actually was started in advance to 10:30 a.m. without further notice, which was obviously illegal. And in the name of pandemic prevention, only 3 people were allowed in to watch the bidding opening process. But it was packed with 30 to 40 police officers. Strangely, recording, videotaping, and live streaming were all prohibited. Public opening for bids is a necessary condition for the auctions. No one is allowed to enter, and no one is allowed to record or live streaming. It was clearly a black box stopping people from supervising. In early August, when my Shifu was abroad, the auction organizer came again asking me where my Shifu lived now. The organizer said that the person concerned must receive the official letter and sign for it in person before the second auction could be carried out. On the 19th, the organizer called me and asked if anyone had signed for the letter. I responded that no one has signed for it yet, and he said that it might not be auctioned. However, it was out of my expectation that the Administrative Enforcement Agency still executed the auction. which seriously affected the rights and interests of the parties involved. These were all evidence that the Administrative Enforcement Agency HSINU branch violated the legal law of enforcement procedures. In fact, we went to the county government to lodge a complaint. At that time, the county government's consumer protection officer said, "The auction process must go through the first, second, and third auctions before it can be finalized." Why was it immediately announced at the scene of the second auction, where the bid failed, would be directly taken over by the National Taxation Bureau, and forcibly nationalized the land? All kinds of illegal enforcement practices forced us to immediately go to the Miaoli District Prosecutor's Office to file a complaint against the enforcement officials. In addition, we also found that during the first foreclosure on July 31st, some media friends came out to cover the news. We could also use the power of the media to report this illegal auction event. However, on August 21st, unexpectedly, not even a media showed up to interview. It turned out that the entire media resources were controlled and blocked by the state machine, which seriously affected the people's right to know. Without freedom of the press, is Taiwan still a country with democracy and the rule of law? I am very grateful to so many experts and scholars who have spoken out for Taijimen internationally, so that this human rights persecution case that has been violently persecuted by the state for 28 years would not be buried into the dust under the bureaucratic culture of official protection. Hopefully, Taiwan will become a country that truly values human rights and return true freedom and democracy to its people. Thank you all.
And thank you, Tongyu Chen, for highlighting the lack of interest of the media in Taijimen every time it was persecuted. They are not primarily interested in truth and justice. They are interested in sensationalist stories to sell, whether true, half true, or totally false. The best evidence is that when they could serve the truth by denouncing the illegitimate confiscation of the Miaoli property, they chose to turn their heads in another direction and to keep silent. That's what they did. Journalists were not interested in the truth. They disregarded the official statement of Taijimen on this issue and did not take any initiative to research the issue. They were not investigation journalists. Their interest for truth was very selective and biased. And now I will give the floor to another DZ, Roger Huang, an analytics engineer.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Willie. Hello, everyone. I'm Roger, a Taijimen 弟子. It is a pleasure to participate in the forum of World Press Freedom Day. When it comes to freedom, as Taiwanese, I'm proud and cherish it. After all, it was not easy for Taiwan to evolve from a country constrained by strict anti-sedition laws become a global leader in freedom speech. And freedom does not mean you can do whatever you want. I think it should be more responsible to protect it. I would like to mention a real case of persecuting human rights and freedoms in Taiwan under the guise of press freedom. It is Taijimen false case. I remember the first time I contact with Taijimen was in 2009. The vibe I felt in the Miaoli Academy is impressive. People there laughed cheerfully one after another. It made me relaxed, especially in this society where we give priority to purpose and efficiency. Here, is really different. Fortunately, 师父 accepted me as a 弟子 and made me be a member of the big family of Taijimen. During I learning Qigong from 师父, I gradually understood the love and peace advocated by 师父 is not just a slogan, but lead us to put into practice continuously. Unexpectedly, I saw the news about Taijimen academies being seized in 2010 and I got lost as to what to do. Besides, the content of the news is totally different from the Taijimen that I know. As an engineer, I will never believe rumor easily and will definitely pursue the truth. This event began on December 19, 1996, when Taiwan just elected its first president democratically. After election, the government carried out political purge in the name of religious anti-criminal. The prosecutor, Hou Kuanren, asked tax officer Shi Yuesheng to give false testimony to fabricate a case. In this case, as early as on July 13, 2007. The criminal court has found that Taijimen not guilty of fraud, tax evasion, or violation of tax codes. Why were Taijimen academies still seized by Taipei branch of the Administrative Enforcement Agency in 2010? Even on August 21 in 2020, the Hsinchu branch of the Administrative Enforcement Agency still insists on illegally auction off the land of Taijimen. Is there any fairness and justice? Control Yuan lists 8 major violations for Hou Kuanren, the prosecutor who investigated the case in 2002. He was also transferred to the Ministry of Justice for strict investigation and punishment, but officials protect him. He has not been punished and has become the director of the Forensic Medicine Research Institute of the Ministry of Justice. It has been 28 years, and the innocent and kind people are still fighting for fair and just in this false case. Ironically, the officials playing with the government system have already earned promotion and got rich. In my opinion, of course, freedom of the press is important, but providing people with accurate information is even more important. This is because on December 19, 1996, Hou Kuanren led prosecutors, police, and a large number of media personnel to search all the Taijimen academies in Taiwan. Subsequently, during the investigation, the media extensively reported negative news about Taijimen, misleading the Taiwanese public and even caused psychological press for judges to handle cases. However, after the Taijimen case, conviction affirmed not guilty by the Supreme Court, only a few media briefly reported this public attention and sensational human rights persecution case that had hyped by Hou Kuan-ren. This not only hindered people's rights to know, but also allowed Hou Kuan-ren and people like him who had used its self-position of power to suppress a specific group to escape punishment and even advance in their career. Therefore, I hope that Friends of Taiwan's media can uphold a sense of justice based on conscience and always report accurate news to fulfill the purpose of the United Nations declared Press Freedom Day. The event called 太极门1219 is like drama, but it actually happened to my 师父 and 师母 and the brother and sisters beside me. After hearing that, they recounted what happened on December 19, 1996. I feel the scenes is still vivid in their mind, as if it was yesterday. But it has been 28 years, in fact. As a 弟子 like me, who joined later and practiced Qigong and self-cultivation in this good place, it also makes us indignant. I really want to protect justice for them and all the tax victims. I hope more people will come together to pay attention to the issue of tax and legal reform and the false case of Taijimen, to push the Taiwan government to carry out a reform. Only in this way, Taiwan's human rights of taxation, fairness, and justice can be served. Thanks.
Thank you, Roger, for shedding your light on the nefarious role of rumors, which is one of the worst enemies of truth, and also the fabrication of false evidence by state authorities themselves, and this in total impunity. In the Taijimen case, the Taiwanese media outlets were one-sided and extensively reported in a biased way which was negative for Taijimen. They misled public opinion, which resulted in a negative image of the movement when the judges had to handle the case. A concrete example concerns a religious group in Japan, the Unification Church. A former prime minister of Japan was assassinated, as it was said in lots of media, by someone who hated this church for personal reasons, and I will not go into the details. The media started a campaign driven by vested interests, not against the killer, but against the religious movement, which has no responsibility in the assassination. And the media hereby formatted public opinion against that church. Political decision makers and even the judiciary, supposed to be neutral and impartial in search of the truth, responsibility, and guilt. The result is that church will be banned, and after such a success, so-called success, it is now another group, another religious group, the Jehovah's Witnesses, that are targeted. So you see the snowball effect of the misrepresentation of some groups by the media, how far it can go in untruth and injustice. And now I will give the floor to Vivian, a journalist.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vivi, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to participate in the forum on World Press Freedom Day today. World Press Freedom Day was established by the United Nations to raise awareness of press freedom and remind governments to respect and promote the right to freedom of expression. This year marks the 31st anniversary of World Press Freedom Day. According to the 2023 Press Freedom Index report, Taiwan ranks 35th, a new high since 2008. VDEM of the University of Gothenburg, Sweden, the latest Democracy Report 2024 report also points out that Taiwan is the country most affected by over six false information in the world, and has ranked first for 11 consecutive years. Let us ask ourselves, has Taiwan really achieved press freedom? Is the media also honest and fair enough to report the fact? Ai Wei-ong, CEO of the East Asia Office of Reporters Without Borders, which is deeply involved in Taiwan, previously accepted an exclusive interview with Central News Agency, and he said that Taiwan's media environment is very good, but there are still problems such as conflicts of interest, the proliferation of fake news, and the entertainment of news. Taiwan has become a model of democracy in the world. It has the responsibility to lead the trend and improve the media environment so that it can better protect Taiwan's democracy. I am a teacher of Taiji. I hope my health can be improved by practicing Qigong. I have been allergic since I was a child. Even every time the seasons change, sore throats and coughs come to me very often. After practicing Qigong for many years, one day I accidentally discovered that I had not catch a cold for more than a year. By the way, in winter, my hands and feet became so cold that made me very uncomfortable and could not sleep well. This phenomenon has also been greatly improved. I came to Taiji just for health. Unexpectedly, it also expanded my international horizons. Last October, I went to the United States with the Taiji Goodwill Cultural Delegation to participate in the opening activities of Taiji in Northern California and Southern California with beautiful traditional cultural performance. I deeply felt that the Taiji cultural diplomacy is high respect internationally, but in Taiwan, it suffers from bullying and suppression by the government. Because of the Taiji human rights persecution case, I had the opportunity to be exposed to the media field. When the government's unfair behavior, we have no choice but to provide relief on our own, and also speak out for other many people who are suffering from tax disasters at the same time. However, As long as this press news had been sent to outside media channels, it often goes nowhere. Based on my nearly 8 years observation, most of Taiwan's mainstream media have obvious political overtones. Specific news channels often represent specific political party positions, which can influence the public to wear biased glasses and create opposition. However, the media should not allow people to have such delusions. It may also lead people to only choose media that cater to their own preferences and turn a blind eye to truly neutral reports. In such a climate, it is difficult for the media to report truthfully and fairly. Causing many important problems. The truth of the message was concealed. Take the Taijimen human rights persecution case that occurred in 1996 as an example. Press freedom is an important channel for the public to learn the truth of the matter. However, Prosecutor Hou Kuan-ren made the illegal investigation public and spread false information. The domestic media's biased one-way reporting at that time made it difficult for the public to know the truth. It is difficult for the public to obtain true and objective information. To this day, Taijimen has been cleared by the third instance judgment of the Supreme Court that it is not guilty, has no tax arrears, no taxation act violation. The administrative agencies still use the media over and over and try to create the illusion that Taijimen is rich but evaded taxes. The actual amount in the account is only a little over 610,000 new Taiwan dollars, but it has been falsely inflated to 3.2 billion. It has been labeled as process of fraud, and the court is demanding full confiscation. At the same time, it is claimed to be tuition fees and business income for tutoring classes, and has been referred to the tax authorities for taxation. Such a serious contradiction in assessment violates both common sense and legal principles. It is nothing but the government using taxation as a pretext to exploit the people. Officials abuse the truth, the false right to hurt innocent people, and even become accomplices in the persecution of religious beliefs and the taxation human rights. In addition, on September 19, 2020, a volunteer Mother Huang in Zhubei was illegally arrested by the police. Xie Boxian, the director of the Zhubei branch of the Hsinchu County Police Department, held a press conference and issued a press release the next day to discredit Mother Huang as a mob, hiding the truth of the matter. After the incident, a group of police officers were quickly transferred their positions and skipped the punishment or accountability still now. In everyone is the fourth estate era, The government should not allow of authoritarian thinking to use the media to suppress dissent. We hope that through today's forum, everyone can play the role of the fourth estate with conscience and use their own platforms to uncover the truth and supervise the government to maintain social fairness and justice. Thank you.
And thank you, Vivi. You pointed at an important issue, the proliferation of fake news and conflicts of interest on the media planet. The result is that any truth is hermetically concealed with such locks. And the only solution seems to be to create alternative channels of information. But it is full of risks. This is what bloggers and whistleblowers have done everywhere around the world, usually at the risk of being prosecuted, sometimes, at the risk of their freedom, and even of their own life or the life of their beloved. On the one hand, the big media companies and their agents defending vested interests ignore or choke alternative voices. On the other hand, political actors in non-democratic countries persecute them and silence their channels of communication. We live in a democratic country, in democratic countries in Europe, and for 35 years, our NGO, Human Rights Without Frontiers, and others have put in place free and independent channels and means of communication to inform political leaders and the media. You can do the same, but be vigilant, be cautious, and be patient before it will take time, before you can see the results and the impact of your work. But believe in what you are doing. You're fighting the right fight, and never get discouraged. Thank you very much. And now I will give the floor to the last speaker, Kevin Jong, a software engineer.
Oh, hello everyone. I'm honored to have opportunity to share my thought with you. Today is World Press Freedom Day, and I think we all agree that news should be unbiased and accurate. With the rapid and convenient spread of information today, we have a wide range of sources to obtain news. But with the speed and the convenience, we need to be vigilant about distinguish truth from falsehood, so we don't fall victim to fake news and make poor decisions. Since I was young, I've been learned from my Shifu, Dr. Hong Daozi, the wisdom to distinguish between truth and false, good and bad, right and wrong. For what is good and righteous, we should promote and advocate vigorously. For what is bad and incorrect, we should take it as a lesson and guard against it. This aligned with the Taiji principle of balancing yin and yang. My Shifu told us to act with conscience, lead us to promote Taiji culture and practice in our daily lives. Through this deep culture heritage, we have the opportunity to connect with the world and spread the message of love and peace. The goal is to plant the seeds of conscience, awaken people's conscience, and balance the negative news in the world. In February, I traveled with my Shifu to Turkey for the Eurasian Economy Summit. Before the trip, the word unity, a message from my Shifu, came to mind, and it aligned with his speech at the summit, where he urged governments and the global citizens to set aside their prejudices, unite and face problem with a positive attitude. This way, we can turn crises into opportunities and return to a sustainable development path. I believe that everyone who joined the trip shared this mindset and supporting each other. Sometimes I feel unsure about what to handle a situation, but the brothers and sisters I practice with quickly gave me suggestions and find the best balance. This experience showed me the importance of unity. With a little more thought and effort, many problems and small errors can be avoided. Even though my chief Dr. Hong Daozi tries to promote the ideas of love and peace and the culture of conscience worldwide, the government still continues to treat the Asian Taijiman cultivation Menpai with injustice and unfairness. It all began with the illegal tax bill and an abuse prosecutor. This prosecutor used the media to spread false and defamatory information, causing several human rights violations and damaging the reputation of the respect for culture, Menpai, for over 28 years. Many people live in fear, and some pass away without seeing the truth revealed. Carrying the burden of misunderstanding and injustice to their graves. This situation demonstrates the importance of press freedom, impartiality and honesty. If news media can report independently and are controlled by the government, the harm is irreparable. That's why my Shifu has stepped up his efforts to push for tax and legal reform, correcting our country's mistakes to benefit all the people of the nation. This is the cultural spirit my Shifu has instilled in us, to do what is right with conscience, and never miss an opportunity to share the right message to everyone. Taijimen Shifu and Dizi work hard to preserve and pass on culture of conscience and goodness. We hope that by promoting this culture of goodness, we can create a solid foundation for a new generation to build a new culture and support global stability and development. Good culture leads to good education, and the good educations lead to thriving economy. By creating a positive cycle with conscience, we can bring humanity together through various cultural forms. Ensure that the world-rich cultural heritage continues, benefit culture generations. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Kevin, for sharing your thoughts about the moral values that must underpin the work of the media. With the emergence of artificial intelligence, it is important to be vigilant about distinguishing between truth and falsehood. It is not easy because nowadays news, pictures, videos come from multiple sources or can be fabricated by artificial intelligence and other methods. So news have to be professionally validated before being published. And it is also a moral responsibility because truth can also disturb a number of powerful people and can put lives of other people in danger. Not everybody can become overnight a provider of true news. Training is needed, honesty is needed, and conscience is needed, what you stress. But the teachings of Dr. Hong have prepared all of you, the disease, to testify about truth, about honesty, and about conscience. Thank you very much for your contribution as well. And the second session now is coming to an end and will be followed by conclusions that Marco Respinti will share with you. He's the director in charge of Bitter Winter magazine, and many other things he's doing as well.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity and the honor to draw some conclusion from a very relevant topic touched upon in this webinar. And I feel the topic very personal also because as you know, I was just said, I work as a professional journalist. So the topic is not, doesn't go astray from what I do every day. And I do thank CESNUR and Human Rights Without Frontiers for bringing another topic in this series, important series of webinar on the Taijuman case. And in fact, the title of today's webinar goes right to the heart of the role of information in a healthy society. In fact, a society where media are friends means a society where media promote accuracy in information, while a society where media are foes is a society where media become the mouthpiece of lies. In saying this, I'm taking for granted two assumptions that I want now to explicit, also explaining why I took them for granted. The first assumption is that when we use the word friend in the field of media, we use it in its purest sense. We're not saying that friendly media are those outlets that we perceive as good because they just uphold our views. In fact, if our opinion and views are fraudulent, we may still have friendly media, but their support would just be sympathy for the devil. On the contrary, we advocate friendly media because we operate on the basis of our perception of acting for good. As to the second assumption, well, I just mentioned it. We assume to be righteous people who deserve a fair treatment by the media. Why did I first take these two assumptions for granted? Because it is normal to take them for granted. And we all do it at every moment in all fields. We all presume to act for the good, and even more. We want to act for good, and we want to be recognized as people working for the good. We then imply that we have a right to be fairly treated by the media as a public mirror of our personal good intentions. We just touched on the core question, which moves from our perception of acting for the good to what good really is. But this question reveals to be just the face of the core question of them all, a question that we already addressed several times and in a number of shapes in this series of webinars on the Taijuman case. And it is truth and what truth is. To ascertain whether our perception of acting for good is truly a promotion of objective good, and not only the advancement of our twisted idea of what good is, we need, in fact, to address the topic of truth. This may prove too gigantic a task for the conclusion of the webinar, but we may be content to say that a healthy society is one where media avoid gratuitous bias, slander, libelous caricature, and falsities. Freedom of religion or belief, FoRB, serves as a key test, and for two reasons, at least two reasons. The first is that the right to FoRB, freedom of religion or belief, is so fundamental and primigenial that should media accuracy fail in this field, no safe haven could remain. The second is that what FoRB what's at stake is so sensitive that while carefulness should always be practiced, shortcomings are at hand. It is in fact easy for the media and for the powers controlling the media to transform divergences with one religious or spiritual group into blatant defamation. Of course, this would be media abdicating their role, but this is why the treatment that media reserve to FoRB, freedom of religion or belief, should always be rigorously monitored. The proper role of media should in fact be objectivity. This is, of course, the lay name of truth, but ours would be such a marvelous world if only objectivity, even before adventuring into the mystery of truth, was honored and respected. Media and the powers behind them should always refrain from promoting bias and ultimately injustice toward the group only because they disagree with it theologically, ideologically, or politically. It would much more advance the cause of a healthy society where groups and people may be criticized, but at the same time always defended in their right to say things that may be also criticized. In that case, the claim by the press to be free, statement that it is not always accurate, would be nobly vindicated. We instead often see the contrary. Diversity and alterity are frequently exacerbated to the point of bringing falsity in. Lies take the place of objectivity, reports become tools of demonization, and the strong power that the media have in shaping the perception of the people and even influence the public discourse or politicians become the source of much sorrow and grievances. What we call the Tajman case brilliantly epitomizes it. Whether and when media repeated that Tajman evaded tax, media ceased to be the friends of objectivity and became the foes of the basic human right to truth. Whether and when media repeated that Tajman lied to the public administration and swindled the state, media ceased to be the friends of objectivity and became the foes of the basic human right to truth. Whether and when media repeated that Tajman is a cult, media ceased to be the friends of objectivity and became the foes of the basic human right to truth. Whether and when media repeated that Tajman raised goblins practicing black magic, media ceased to be the friends of objectivity and became the foes of the basic human right to truth. Whether and when they do not accurately remind their readers that Tajman has been repeatedly cleared of all false charges by all levels of Taiwanese justice while still suffering the consequences of a fabrication, media ceased to be the friends of objectivity and became the foes of the basic human right to truth. And finally, whether and when media do not stand strongly, courageously, and uncompromisingly by Tajman's side against a corrupt and tyrannical exercise of power, media not only cease to be the friends of objectivity, becoming the foes of the basic human right to truth, but they also betray their mission. In fact, as a famous unattributed aphorism often thought to have been uttered by Irish thinker and statesman Edmund Burke goes, quote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing," end of quote. Media should in fact not only refrain from lies, which is the minimum, but should also show to their audience the right and true side of incidents and events. Separating facts from opinions is a matter that English-speaking journalism has elected as its own. That ideal seems to have taken shape as early as 14th century Europe with Corantos, the precursors of the 2.5 centuries later, what 2.5 centuries later could be called newspapers. In fact, Corantos prided themselves on being essential and simple. With the term alternate fortune and honesty, many have been their disciples and imitators in separating facts from opinions. Yet that ideal is not truly ideal. It may work, as it did when and where it properly worked. Only in homogeneous societies where the common sense of people takes for granted, by education and tradition, the criteria of good and evil. In that case, the reader does not need to be continually reminded of those criteria, and the reporting of mere facts would suffice to distinguish good things, events, and people from their evil parodies. But in contemporary society, when common sense is increasingly dismantled in the name of total subjectivism, separating facts from opinions becomes just another tool of disorientation and bias. In fact, without any background or supplementary information, the reader is left alone, drifting in a stormy ocean of mute facts. It is here that the media, while claiming to be the guardians of a free society, transform themselves into tools of oppressing consciences. Media should instead do the opposite, not substituting facts with opinions, since opinions are just volatile and subjective takes on things, frequently the product of the same inaccuracy on facts that journalists claim to fight. Not even piling one's opinion on the opinion of others, since opinions always reflect just the vaporicent mood of the moment. Personally, I always say that I'm not even interested in my own opinions. Why should I then care for the opinions of others? Frankly, I am afraid of a society where one could earn a salary being an opinionist, imposing his or her mind on uneducated people that, thanks to the abnormous power that TV and journalists and social media can exert, swallow their daily doses of mediatic truth on a wide range of topics, from rocket science to the most intricate mechanism of finance. No, in my opinion, media should tell facts as naked as possible and furnish a handbook of criteria to situate them in space and time before any useless opinion. That day, Tajiman, as well as many other groups and persons, many were mentioned in today's webinar, will find a true friend even in media that disagree with them. And I do thank you for being with me with my conclusion. We just came to the final steps of today's webinar, and by saying goodbye and thank you to all of you, I'm launching the third and final video for today, which is a very nice and interesting song.
And the Ministry of Finance reneged on their promise to revoke the tax bill. The National Tax Bureau illegally auctioned off the sacred land of Taijimen. The land was illegally taken evasion or any other charges. The National Tax Bureau and the Ministry of Finance reneged on their promise to revoke the tax bill. The National Tax Bureau illegally auctioned off the sacred land of Taijumen. The land was illegally taken into state ownership. Where is the rogue government of just conscience? Where are justice and human rights? The righteous people are united with conscience to defend justice, human rights, and peace. The righteous people are united with conscience to defend justice, human rights, and peace.
In Taiwan, we at Little Winter saw at work the Taliban of the National Tax Bureau, or Taliban of the Administrative Enforcement Agency, who defy near long persecution of a peaceful spiritual movement in a democratic country such as Taiwan. The Taijumen case is internationally exemplary and important, and yet we plan to continue our campaign about it. Our voice will not be silenced until the voice of justice will speak and solve the case.